Witamy na konferencji prasowej.
Welcome to the press conference following the informal joint internal market and trade ministerial. So we welcome the Trade Minister Krzysztof Paszyk, the Commissioner for Interinstitutional Relations, Economic Development, Maroš Šefčovič, and the Executive Vice President of the Commission on Prosperity and the Industrial Strategy, Stéphane Séjourné.
Panie ministrze, może pan zacząć.
Minister, you may start. Dear Stéphane, esteemed Maroš, so behind us now we have a joint meeting of ministers of industry and the internal market, as well as ministers responsible for trade. And as I have already been saying today, this is a completely new format which has been introduced by the Polish presidency. So it's something completely new, but it responds to current needs and challenges. If we are to protect the European economy, we have to face up to these challenges, and that requires these kind of joint meetings. And so I'm very grateful to the Vice President and to the Commissioner and to our colleagues, the ministers, for having responded in such an enthusiastic way to our invitation and for having participated in this joint meeting. And I think it has proved that it was a good idea. And I think subsequent presidencies who will guide the work of the Council will follow our example. We have to respond to the challenges to our competitiveness and to our economic security in Europe. We need to develop our industry, and that means an ambitious and assertive trade policy. And that's why we've joined these two ideas together, trade and industry, two sides of the same economic coin, if you like. And during our work, we stressed the importance of supporting key sectors of the European economy, such as the chemical industry and the steel industry. These are extremely key sectors of our economy. A lot of attention was devoted to the EU's ability to counteract disruptions in global supply chains, in particular in the area of critical raw materials. It is our joint ambition to build balanced trade agreements and sectoral agreements covering digital issues and establishing new trade partnerships. We also talked about including the candidate countries in European value chains to the mutual benefit of both sides. And we're convinced that by building shorter and more secure European value chains and by diversifying our suppliers, we will strengthen our economic security. We have also faced up to the need to look at the new dynamic in transatlantic relations. The EU-US partnership, as many ministers stressed, is and should continue to be strategic. We think that in the context of the communications coming out of Washington at the moment, we need to maintain our solidarity. EU countries need to stick together. And today, in the course of our meeting, that solidarity was expressed on many occasions by many ministers. We will have to keep calm, however, and wait for what exactly it is the Americans want to say. At the moment, we're just hearing very initial announcements, the beginnings of announcements, but we are prepared to engage in a positive, constructive dialogue with the Americans and to keep that dialogue going, and I wanted to share that with you. During the meeting, people were also express concern about microprocessors and about Europe being divided into two categories, and we hope that this issue will develop positively. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Can I ask the Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Stéphane Séjourné, to take the floor?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. At first, in this period of instability, which is politically a little bit uncertain for a number of our leaders at European level, and I think that the Polish presidency has fulfilled a role today by showing initiative and leadership that we so dearly need in this period of insecurity in Europe, by bringing together the European ministers to discuss economic competitiveness and also external matters. The matter of foreign trade was discussed today. These are the two areas that the minister said that belong together. Today they're completely integrated in our worlds. And I think that this validates the approach that the Commission has been taking as well since it started out, the new Commission, with a positive agenda on competitiveness. We worked with the Commission to present the competitiveness compass just a few days ago, and I think that shows you what the economic strategy of the European Union is going to be over the next 5 years. This strategy is fairly clear, and it is based on investment and strategy, and also focusing on our ability to improve competitiveness at European level, based on a number of different bits of legislation which are seen as business acts, which will enable us, and we've said this, which will enable us to actually focus on the sectors in difficulty: steel, the car industry, and the chemical industry. In Europe, we really do need to support these sectors and to protect them when they are confronted with unfair competition from outside. We've also had very interesting discussions looking at our strategy for simplification within the EU, because with the Clean Industrial Deal, we're going to be trying to accelerate our decarbonisation plan, and we're going to have a first omnibus for simplifying legislation at the end of February, which will be aimed at removing a number of administrative processes for lightening the burden on industry and to simplify the bureaucracy surrounding our industries pertaining to European legislation. We have also hoped that this simplification of legislation will lead to approaches which will be sectoral and rather than working in silos. As for international trade and the international environment, this is also very interesting for us at this stage, because we are watching in the news today. Virtually every hour we have an update on how things are changing with trade, in the trade situation, and the stance of the U.S. for the future and compared to how they behaved in the past. And so this is an opportunity for the European Union to have an important debate with the U.S. and to rethink our relations. I think it's in the interest in both the Europeans and the Americans to have a good relationship with our important partner. If we have a trade war, we'll all be losers. And so that really was one of the conclusions of the discussion that we had today. It shows, I think, that Europe is going to defend its interests in this difficult period. We have also developed a number of tools to enable us to defend European interests in this difficult period. So the interests of the European citizens are, of course, jobs, our potential for growth at an international level and at European level, and our strategy for international trade. My colleague, Commissioner Šefčovič, will talk about our strategy in more detail, but I think that we want to look at how we work with other partners, because Europe is going to continue working with a number of partners on the international stage. So this is the situation for us Europeans today. We are going to continue along our path. We are going to build upon our strengths for the future. We have a market of 450 million consumers, which our market has not been fully integrated or been fully realized. I think that gives us a potential and a strategy for further developing our market, developing services. And I myself, I will be trying to bring down a number of barriers to the single market and providing perspectives for growth within the single market. This, I think, is always a possibility in a number of sectors. I think we've also can be very positive because of the sign of unity that we have from our European partners in the perspective of the transatlantic relations. But I'll give the floor to my colleague, Commissioner Šefčovič.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič?
Good afternoon, dear Christoph. Thank you very much for your hospitality. It was indeed a pleasure to have our discussion in the beautiful city of Warsaw in Royal Castle yesterday evening, and I really would like to wish the Polish presidency a successful term, especially given the global geopolitical uncertainty. Let me begin with the topic I know is most on your radar: the relationship between the European Union and the United States. While I will not speculate on what might be, I want to state clearly that transatlantic partnership is of strategic importance. No other two economies in the world are as integrated as we are. And on both sides of Atlantic, we benefit fully from this unique bond, and there is nothing unfair in it. You have already heard me say that while the EU has a surplus of 154 billion in goods vis-à-vis the US has a surplus in services of 104 billion euros as regards the European Union. So this means that the overall EU trade surplus towards the US is only some 3% of our total trade flow of 1.5 trillion euros, so around 50 billion. And if you hear sometimes that EU buys very little or nothing from United States, I would recommend you to look at these figures from the Eurostat, because I think they are very clear. They are from October of last year. So just to give you the latest figures, just in the last period, the European Union bought goods of value of 350 billion, and we bought 400 billion in services. So altogether, almost 750 billion euros of goods and services, which I think it's a very, very, very significant sum and big part of this 1.5 trillion relationship. On top of it, I think we have to put this into the perspective, because these figures reflect the specialization of our respective economies, but also consumer preferences. And let's not forget that more than 4 billion euros of goods and services cross Atlantic daily, while over 5 trillion euros is cross-invested in our economy. And I would add very important element that almost 5 million jobs on both sides of Atlantic depend on this healthy and robust trade EU-US relationship. At the same time, every year, some 300 billion euros of the European private savings is channeled abroad, mainly to the US, because they're seeking investments in scale-ups, startups, blue-chip companies, or New York Stock Exchange, for example. So I think from all these figures, it is clear to me that the cooperation pays off, while across-the-board tariffs make everyone worse off. And this is and will be my message to my prospective US counterparts. So we are ready to listen. We are ready to engage, to negotiate in our mutual interest. Having said that, the EU would respond firmly to any trading partner that unfairly or arbitrarily imposes tariffs on EU goods. Now, turning to our discussions on ways trade agreements help integrate candidate countries into the EU value chains. Here, the main message is that we don't need to wait until accession to the European Union, because much can already be done now. The tools are clearly there. The EU's trade agreements with candidate countries, notably the deep and comprehensive free trade areas with Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia, are very innovative. On top of the standard liberalization component for goods, services, investment or public procurement, they also include our partners' commitment to align with relevant EU law. And finally, if you allow, Christoph, a few words on how trade policy can support the EU's long-term competitiveness. There is no doubt that trade remains key to the EU's future growth. First, effective partnerships around the world help us secure affordable access to production inputs, including critical minerals, while reducing risky overdependencies thanks to diversification. Second, trade agreements open new markets for our companies to grow and stay globally competitive. And third, trade helps ensure that our businesses operate on the global level playing field, especially in the face of frequent unfair non-market practices by some countries. So all in all, I am convinced, given the increasing global competition and trade tension, that the EU's network, which is the largest and fastest growing network of trade agreements globally, covering 76 countries that account for almost half of the EU trade, will be very beneficial and a boost to our competitiveness. Just to give you some additional and the last numbers, the value of the EU trade through this agreement surpassed 2 trillion euros in 2022. Of 724,000 EU companies exporting goods outside of the EU, some 690,000 are SMEs, the backbone of the European economy. And what is also very important, over 30 million jobs in the EU are supported by exports. And I would like to see new business opportunities created by deepening our trade and investment partnership with like-minded partners around the globe. And I'm personally committed to bringing new political impetus into ongoing or prospective negotiations. We are deal makers. This is in our DNA. And we have already shown that over the past few months, we concluded deals with Switzerland, Mercosur, and Mexico, while also relaunching negotiations with Malaysia. And we are moving forward on those with Philippines, Indonesia, and Thailand. And after my meetings in Davos, I can also say that Gulf countries are very much interested in deepening our trade ties, and we are looking at how we can accelerate the process. Last part of my remarks covers the unfair competition, because very often this is the phenomenon which threatens EU single market. And here we are ready to use protective tools at our disposal, such as trade defense instrument, which we use to rigorously enforce when necessary, and will be working with full application of the foreign subsidies regulation. We will also explore avenues to increase the robustness of the EU trade defense tools, and our response in this regard would be tailored for each specific sector. In the automotive sector, we have already imposed duties on unfairly subsidized electric vehicles from China. In relation to the steel sector, we are reviewing the safeguard which is in place with the views of tightening it, and I should be able to come forward with the results soon. We are also working on the long-term solution to address the situation once the safeguard expires in 2026. To conclude, I would like to stress that trade and competitiveness are communicating vessels. They are truly interlinked. So in that context, today's discussions have been of great value. And once again, thank you very much, Christoph, and big thanks to the Polish presidency.
Thank you very much. Now we are opening the floor for questions. Yes, Jorge from Bloomberg. Yes, please, you are first. Please introduce yourself and say which medium.
Yes. Good afternoon, Jorge Valero with Bloomberg. 2 questions, please. The first one, the Presidency, the minister said that some ministers expressed their concern about the access to the AI chips, how the different member states are split in the EU when it comes to access to the chips. So what the EU, in concrete, the Commission intends to do to solve this. I guess it will be part of the discussions with the new Trump administration. And secondly, whether, and this is a question for the Commissioner, whether there were calls inside the room from some ministers to prolong the suspension of the EU tariffs on the US products, and what was your response as a gesture of, let's say, friendly gesture towards the Trump administration?
If I may respond on AI chips, I have to say that it was very disappointed news coming from outgoing administration that they adopted this decision despite our interventions and direct communication, also on the level of Secretary Raimondo at that time. I would say, explanations we've been given at that time was linked with the dual export controls and other argumentation which we simply do not buy. We think that this is totally unacceptable to divide the EU member states into different groups. Of course, once we get to the, what I hope very soon, positive trajectory of our relations and constructive discussion, this clearly would be one of the topics on the table, because I think that all EU member states should have equal access to this new technology. Your second question was not raised in this category or in this tune, because what I think is very clear right now is that we are waiting for the first contact with the new U.S. administration. I understand that Secretary of Commerce, Mr. Latnik, has his confirmation hearing right now. Hopefully they will be completed this week, so we definitely would like to engage very quickly with him, and later on also with the U.S. Trade Representative, where I think the confirmation hearings are coming in a couple of days later. And we just would like to discuss with them how they see the EU-US relationship. So we are ready for the positive engagement, for the constructive agenda. We are ready to work on what I hope will be mutually advantageous, positive package for both of our economies, because from the figures I presented, it's very clear that this relationship is good for both of us. It creates a lot of jobs. It creates a lot of benefits for the companies and for our economies. And once we have this first assessment, we of course will consult our member states, and then we will react. But of course, will be very constructive, but if we will feel that we are just hit by the tariffs in unfair, arbitrary manner, then I think also the message from the leaders yesterday evening, but also from the room this morning, was that we will react firmly.
Thank you.
Jeśli chodzi o pytanie dotyczące...
As regards the export restrictions question on microprocessors, in the discussion, we concluded that because of the strategic economic relation linking the EU and the United States, and also because of the strategic defense relationship and security relationship we have with the Americans, we shouldn't allow a situation where European countries find themselves in 2 different categories, where the Americans are attempting to separate us into those who have unlimited access and those who have limited access. So I think we all agreed that this is not a good, desirable situation, and that it requires action on our part, to restore a uniform treatment of EU countries.
Thank you very much. And next question.
Thank you. Léa Marchal from Agence Europe. I have a question that is not on the transatlantic relationship, on the integration of candidate countries to the single market, and in particular Ukraine and Moldova. How much of a consensus is there on the fact that we need to integrate them progressively? And a subsequent question is, do you think that there is room for further liberalization with Ukraine in particular, knowing the sensitivities that come out of some member states? Thank you.
Okay,
To tym razem ja zacznę.
Maybe I could start this time.
Naszą propozycją jest
Well, our proposal is for the countries which are aspiring to the European Union, for them to be included on convenient terms for those countries already in the EU, for them to be included in our supply chains. And there are a number of situations where we can already initiate such cooperation, or where we can deepen the cooperation where it already exists. That would be the next step in the process of integration before formal entry of these countries into the EU. And I got the impression from the discussion we had that this idea was positively generally accepted.
If I can add, we have, I would say, discussed in a, I would say, more detail the progress already achieved by Ukraine, Moldova, the possibilities for Georgia and Serbia. But I think if you ask about Ukraine, what is, I think, very important to highlight is the fact that thanks to the DCFTA since 2016, the trade grew significantly. So currently we are at the volumes of 60 billion euros. And there is, of course, huge interest from our Ukrainian partners to go along this gradual integration into the single market. And we are working very closely with Ukraine in this regard. One, I would say, novelty, which we presented also this morning to the ministers, is our plans to start the work on a specific agreement on, I would describe it in the simple language as a mutual recognition of the standards for industrial products. We have something similar with Switzerland, something similar with Israel, and we believe that this would, again, bring more interest for the investors to invest in Ukraine, and also it would make it easier for Ukrainians to also export industrial products. I was also highlighting the importance of the alignment for these countries with the European rules, because if I just take into account the public procurement, the expectations for the reconstruction and renovation of Ukraine are that that would be the task in the realm of 400 billion euros. And of course, I'm sure that European Union and European companies would be very much interested in that process, but for that we need to have very clear rules, very clear processes, and that's also one of the, I would say, priorities for both Ukraine and European Union. On the other issues which you've been referring to, I believe that you've been highlighting the discussion about replacement of autonomous measures in the field of agriculture, which will expire in June. So currently we are discussing this within the Commission together with our member states. We will prepare the proposals, and of course we already inform our Ukrainian partners that also our proposal will have to reflect the sensitivities in the field of agriculture, and we will be able to be a little bit more concrete once we complete our preparatory work. And we also discussed with the Polish presidency the political timing calendar, because we know that this ATM measure should expire in June. So that's the process we are currently going through. But of course we will be keeping you informed once we move to the next stage.
Thank you. Because of a very tight schedule, we have room only for one question. Last one question.
Thanks very much. Koen Verhelst for Politico. Commissioner Šefčovič, you started with debunking a few things in the beginning of your speech. You say you're constructive and you want to engage with your U.S. counterparts. Are you worried that the Trump administration does not really see facts the same way as you do?
I think that it sometimes happens in, I would say, this international contacts, and therefore I think one of the, let's say, takeaways from our discussion this afternoon was that we should work with very clear facts and figures, that our discussion should be evidence-based. And therefore, I was showing you, I would say, the undisputable figures coming from October Eurostat. So I think that, and I think that these figures are really confirming that our trade relationship is absolutely robust, is mutually advantageous, and we see that there is a lot of potential for growth. It's a huge potential for creating new jobs on the both sides of the Atlantics, and of course there is a lot of sectors and areas where we can cooperate, and that would be our message. That I describe the EU-US trade relationship as, I would say, the most important artery of the global trade. So if you look at it from the perspective of our global partners, so this is more than 30% of the global trade. So I think that we have to be very responsible, very careful how we approach this issue, because we are talking about 5 million jobs, we are talking about 5 trillion of mutual investments, we are talking about 1.5 trillion of trade of goods and services every year, and that would be our approach from the EU side. We'll be calm, we'll be engaging, we'll be constructive, and I hope that this would be also the approach from side of the United States of America. So let's start, let's discuss, and I believe that if there are any issues on the table from their side, that we'll be ready to look at them constructively, and if what we look like is fair deal, fair solution, I'm sure we will find it.
Thank you very much. We have to finish. Thank you.